Hi, and welcome back to the tutorial video for Rapid Application Development, Part 1210. This is the second video in the series, and in this video we're going to cover basic user registration. So I've created this web form user interface already. We've got 3 text boxes, 1 for the username and 2 for the password. It's always a good idea to get the user to confirm their password because in a password field you can't see the characters that you've typed. So that confirmation just kind of saves them from making a typo on their password. There's 3 validators that make sure that the password fields have been filled out correctly. And you'll see I've also added a radio button list to check whether or not the user should be created in a role called admin. This video is not going to cover roles, but we'll come back to this one later. So for now we're just going to assume that we're not creating a user in any special role. So we've got our register button here and our feedback label to give the user information should the registration fail for some reason. In order for the site to work, we're going to create the click event on the register button. So I'm just going to double click it to get to the code. And you'll see we've got this register click event. Now, in order to register a new user, we've got to do a few steps. We have to capture the information from the registration form, set up the new user's identity, have access to our user store, and then get the user manager object to create our new identity in the user store. Once we've done that, then later we can log this user in and redirect them on to the rest of our site. So we're going to start by putting in the using statements that we need in order to use the identity libraries. I'm going to start by putting in the using statement for identity and for the identity that uses Entity Framework. This is why in the previous video we had to install those packages, because without those we wouldn't be able to import different objects using these using statements. So here's our 2 using statements that we need. Now we're going to start by declaring a reference to our user store and then creating our user manager object. I'm going to put in those 2 pieces. Here's our user store. The type of user that we're using is identity user. We'll give it a name. And there's our user store object. And now we're going to create our user manager. Again, the type is identity user. And we pass our user store in as a parameter for the user manager's constructor. We do this so we know what user store this manager is managing. The next step is creating an identity user based on the information that we've entered from the form. So I'm going to grab the username from the text box and try to use it to create a new identity user object. So in order to pass the username in as a parameter, I'm just going to look in our text box and grab the text property from there. So this line of code creates the new identity user object in our application. Now in order to create the new user in the user store, that is, put them into the database table, we need our user manager to perform that action for us. So the next little bit of code takes our user manager object and calls a create function. So we want to try to create this user that we just made in our application. The create function is going to create it in the user store for us, and we're also going to provide a password, which is the password that comes from the web form. So we're going to create our new user with the password from the web form, like this. Now when we call create, we have an option of capturing the results of that create. So anytime we're capturing any results, we have to save it in an identity results object. So by creating this object here, user results, now we can find out if the creation was successful or not. and then act accordingly. So I'm going to put a little if statement in here that says if the user result did not succeed. You see it has this property succeeded, and I'm just going to use the not there to say that if it was not successful, we're going to give the user feedback, telling them exactly why it was not successful. So we can put a little error message, error creating user, and we can also use the user result object to look in its group of errors and show us the reason why. Now oftentimes there's more than one error, but usually we're just interested in the first error that occurred. So we can choose first or default to give us an error message there that will tell us why the result did not succeed. The else branch of this would take place when the user manager successfully created a new user. So in our case, what we want to do when we've created a new user successfully is log them in. So we're going to authenticate our newly created user and then forward them on to the rest of our website. So check out the next video when we create logins for the newly created user.